What's cropping up, stockers? Zach the Stock Cropper on September 12th here. Just got done editing together the video from our field day that we held 2 days ago on September 10th, 2020, near our site, or on our site near Buffalo Center, Iowa. It was a great event. We had about 75 folks show up from states all over the Corn Belt. We had folks from Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, Minnesota. Just a wonderful collection of people that came together and exchanged ideas, and a really, really fun day of interaction. So what follows here is the video from that field day event. I hope for those of you that wanted to attend but couldn't, this is for you folks to have the opportunity to see what we shared at that event. Thanks for watching.
All right, well, I think we'll get started, and to make this thing official, I should say, what's cropping up, stockers? So I'm Zach the Stock Cropper. For those of you that only know me on YouTube or Twitter, my real name's Zach Smith, and I'd like to welcome you to this little experiment that we've called stock cropping for the last 8 months, almost to the day now. So it is incredibly humbling to have this many folks be curious and come from as far away as folks have come to see this. We've had folks, I think we have folks here from Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, Indiana, Minnesota, Iowa, and a drone overhead. This thing's been a whirlwind, and we've had a ton of fun, and the best part has been meeting all of the different folks that have wanted to interact and been curious with this project. And so sincerely thank you for coming here to see this. So a couple housekeeping items that I want to get out of the way here before we get going. So we've got our porta potty over here. If anyone needs to know that, we've got hand sanitizer in there. My wife, my beautiful wife Mandy, is in the back. She's got drinks that are available if you guys would like a water, a pop, or an adult beverage. I see we've got FFA kids here, so you guys better behave. And so that's that. And then the last thing is, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I think some of you probably saw in the RSVP that I had exposure in my own house with a daughter that got quarantined, or not, I shouldn't say direct exposure, but she got quarantined from being next to another kid. So I would love to shake everyone's hand and get close, but just out of respect for you, I'm going to maintain distance. And I ask that everyone here be good folks and do the same, because I've got a couple people that are involved in this project that do have that are very sensitive to COVID. So if we could just respect that, I would very much appreciate it. So I think that's all the housekeeping stuff. So at this time, it's time for some introductions. A lot of people know me as the public face, but there's some key people behind this thing that it's time for them to stand up and be recognized. So Sheldon, Lance, and Juice, if you want to join me on the concrete apron up here. So you can tell we're all on the same team with these cute t-shirts we got. So like I said, I'm the public face. I'm what you see on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook with the whole deal. But this isn't just the Zach Smith project. This project has got, it's got a lot of people behind it. There's a lot of people that influenced this project over the years. But these are the three people that have been the most important to this coming to realization outside of myself. And so I want to introduce each of them and tell them about the role. So the first one I'm going to start with is my bohemian-looking friend here, Lance Peterson, from Rush City, Minnesota. And how far north is that of the cities?
About an hour.
About an hour north of the Twin Cities. And so if you want to know how this idea of stock cropping came about, Lance was sipping whiskey, I think, on a Friday night. Is that true?
It is true.
And like all good ideas on Friday nights, sipping whiskey, that's how this thing was born out. But he had the idea, and what the idea was stemmed from is that Sheldon and I had been working on this concept of trying to figure out how to make intercropping more dynamic and more profitable than what we'd played around in the past with just a corn-soybean rotation. We were very interested in Jason Mock and the relay stuff that he'd been doing. Jason's here today. And we were trying to find a way to make that system work better than the confines of what we were working around currently. And Lance had the idea of simply, what if you put a mobile pen with livestock in between the strips of corn? And from that, Sheldon texted me the next morning, I think it was, something like that. And that my first reaction was, well, that's not going to work. I think this is the first reaction everybody would have. But the more I thought about it, my mind started racing. The three of us were messaging each other back and forth on Twitter DM, and it just started flowing. And it was like, well, we're going to have this mobile barn, and it's going to collect rainfall, and it could be solar powered and advanced, and we'll have multiple species of livestock. And it was just, I didn't sleep for about 3 days. I was so excited about what we'd kind of stumbled onto. So Lance gets full credit for the spark. The next person I want to introduce is my primary partner in this project, the one with most of the talent, the silent Bob of the project, the Sheldon Stevemer. So, yeah, you can give him a round of applause. So, Sheldon and I have been friends for a long time, and Lance and Sheldon and I are actually all connected through strip tillage. Now, that was kind of the common thread. And Sheldon and I have been going back and forth for probably 10 years, been very interested in a lot of these things of this topic. We played around with the intercrop thing, I think 10 years ago, the 60-inch corn thing. Yeah, my papers are all blowing there. We did that back in 2013 it was, and we've been very, very interested in these, I guess what I would call biohacks. And we've had a kind of a whole relationship. I think our wives think we're nuts. We're usually passing ideas at 5 a.m. on via text message. But Sheldon's background, he's a farmer 30 miles north, corn and soybeans, and he's got one of the last independent farrow to finish hog operations, probably in Faribault County. He's an incredibly good farmer and overly humble, and that's why I have to do the bragging for him. But Sheldon's really, his big contribution, other than his ideas, is his skills with engineering. And so when you look at our Cluster Cluck 5000, if I had built that myself, I wouldn't have made it 30 feet. But because Sheldon's here, he's got his master's in engineering, and he designs for a metal shop about 45 miles northeast of here. And when we built this thing, or we're designing it up, he'd AutoCAD'd it, and we had a lot of ideas. And I said, when we put it in the field, we're going to have to probably be fine with coming down and cutting it apart and welding it, because we're not going to get it right the first time. And by golly, we set the thing in the field, and we haven't touched it with a torch or a welder since. So I give him a lot of credit for the design. So, and then last but not least, Jordan Juice Newton. If you watch the videos, you know him as Juice. So Jordan is my operations manager for the other businesses that I run. I've got a seed and chemical dealership, and then I farm as well outside of this project here around Buffalo Center. Jordan's been with me for about a year, and he's absolutely fantastic. When you see a lot of the assembly on the barn itself, Jordan did a lot of that work, some of the design around the water system. He built the whole roof, assembled all that stuff, and then he is the sucker, or the poor sucker that has to do all the choring every day, because I live about 17 miles north and east of here. So Jordan lives here on this farm. This is the farm that I grew up on. And he's done a fantastic job keeping everything alive and in. We haven't lost any animal to escape or anything, and that's a testament to him. So I get all the likes, I get the retweets, but I'd ask you humbly to recognize the people behind the scenes in this project and give them a round of applause. Thank you, boys. That's perfect. Okay, so to kind of set the scene of what I want to talk about today, I want to start with why. Why did we come up with this system? And, I think for all of us, Sheldon and Lance and I were all relatively small farmers. I have, a whole other full-time gig, and I farm 300 acres on the side. And part of the frustration is that we've had is when we look at how things are going in this business, there's a lot of things that just aren't necessarily working tremendously well for us as this community right now. And when I was reflecting on what I was going to talk about today, I thought a lot about community. And what I wanted to start with here first is an exercise of just awareness of what we used to have in our ag community. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to just take you on a tour of every place around this acreage within 1 mile that's been here in the lifetime of my father and I. So take you back to about 1952. And I want to illustrate the difference of what we've had and where we're at from people involved in farming here. So I'm going to take you around a tour by names for folks that are within a mile distance. So we had up on the corner the Scogans, the Hippens, the Winklemans, the Potters that you can see there to the east. This was, I think, Dad, was this the Lindbergh place before my family moved on in 1983. That grove right there was the Wessels. Down on the corner a mile south were the two Frericks, Nanny and Fred, I believe. Grove down there to the south was the Ackerman place. The place across was Ray Hippen. There were the two Steen brothers across the section, two Murrays across a little bit that way. Stephensons, and then my farm, the Smith farm, a mile north, and then the Bill Beadle farm just east of that. So if you count those all up, there was 16 farm operations within 1 mile of this site within my dad and my lifetime here that were working operations that had livestock, crops, and they had families that contributed to this community. And when you look back and compare that to where we are now, how many full-time farmers that are from those families would you guess are still actively farming? One. There's one. My neighbor Keith Frericks, just down here to the south. You would say, well, what about you, Zach? Well, farming's not my full-time gig. So, I illustrate that point because there's at one point a long time ago, we had a lot more people involved. They fed this little community in here. I was talking to my dad about this, and I was asking him these questions to make sure I got the names right of who was around. And I said, well, how many feed stores were there in town to feed those people, or to feed those operations? And he said, well, I think there was 3 or 4. Well, how many places could you sell your pigs in town? Well, there was 4. And when you look at where we're at now, we've got a Dollar General, a Casey's, a bank, and a few businesses on Main Street. We don't have any of those support systems. And so, it's just a lot has changed with this consolidation and the reasons, that we've got to this point. And how did we get to this point? Well, we've had a cheap food policy in our country for a long time. And that's driven this, when I was out at Jason Mock's, I talked about the funnel, this consolidation funnel that's been going on for a long time. And what that does is it drives the people that are going to survive, to have an increased need for capital. You have an increased need for inputs if you're going to scale up. You've got to, if you're going to remove the diversity of being, taking livestock out of the mix, you've got to replace that with other technologies. If you're going to scale up, you tend to need more things and more trinkets that you have to buy. And it's just kind of this circle that never really ever ends. And we end up in this place with lower margins, huge risk, huge dollars at place. And we've got a lot of policies like crop insurance that drive a lot of this stuff. And so, when I, just a second. When I think about all this stuff, it just kind of makes me, wonder where it's going to end. And when I look at this consolidation funnel that I talked about out there, it's going to speed up immensely in the next couple years. When you look around, within my own seed agency, the seed business I have, I look at the average age of my customers that are going to be out there, and I would guess I would probably lose maybe a third to a half of them in the next 5 years. And that, that race for that land is going to try to be gobbled up by other people, and the operations are going to scale and they're going to get bigger. And this pattern is going to continue, and we're going to have fewer and fewer people even than what we have now out there. And when you get to the bottom of that, get to the bottom of the funnel, when the consolidation, gets to the point where maybe in Winnebago County all we have left is 10 farmers, my question is does that make our lives any better out here? Do our communities are they going to have any place to thrive? I mean, what will we have for businesses? What will we have for school systems? What's going to be left? And I think a lot of folks in this business, or just the business in general, we kind of glorify this pursuit of scale. And the older I get, the more I sit here and ask why and what is the purpose and what is going to be left at the end of the day whenever we get to that point. And so, I'm relaying this stuff to try to set up why we came up with this idea called stock cropping. And so I want to share a quote that my cousin Tyler shared with me this last weekend that I thought was kind of pertinent to what I'm trying to set up here. And the quote goes something like this: if you don't design your own life plan, chances are you'll fall into someone else's plan. And guess what they have planned for you? Not much. And that's kind of the way, to me, it feels right now in this business for a lot of folks. Doesn't matter in the crop side, you're in the livestock side. That's kind of the spot we're in. And so what we wanted to do with this system is we wanted to take all of those things, all of those negatives that I just talked about, and find opportunities within that. And that's where the soul of stock cropping came from. So what I want to do now is talk about this system that you're seeing in front of you and what are the principles behind that. So stock cropping, if I have to give somebody a 15-second elevator speech on what it is, I simply say stock cropping is the intersection and cross-leveraging of livestock and row crops together in the field at the same time. That's what it is. And when we put this thing together, the keys that we wanted to inject into it versus the monocrop field of soybeans that I have right next here is we wanted to have a ton of biodiversity. And so when I say biodiversity, when you look out at the strips that we have out here, we have, I think, 6 or 7 different species of plants that we put in, where there was 5 in our original pasture mix. And then we've got our corn, which we'll be seeding cover crops into here in probably a couple weeks. And then we've got, you see here in our Cluster Cluck 5000, we've got currently today, the chickens were butchered, they would be trailing behind, but today we've got 3 species, and when they were in the strips we had 4 different species of livestock. And when I use the term leveraging, what that means is that they're both benefiting off of the other. And I'll explain some of those principles. So when you look at our corn strips out here, because we've got this shorter pasture stature, for those of you that aren't familiar with the intercropping principles, having that space, having that gap where there's full sunlight on those rows allows that corn production really to be maximized. If you can give plants full light penetration down to the bottom of the canopy, you can really grow some incredible corn. And so we've, because the animals have taken that down and it creates that opportunity, we were able to manage the corn where we have an increased population effect on the outside. So we planted a shorter hybrid in stature, and we've cranked the population up to between, I think the inside row is 52,000 and the outside is somewhere between 55 to 60,000 plants that we've got there. In the middle, we've got a taller hybrid that is meant to kind of lengthen up. So if you get up here on this hill, you can actually see the dome effect of how that canopy develops. And that's part of how the animals provide value for the plants, and opening that up so they can have full light penetration. And you can grow some hellacious corn doing that. Jason's talked about that for a long time in a lot of his tweets. And we did this in 2012, and some of our yield estimates were close to 380 bushel when you do the counts with those type of populations with the ears that we have out there. So this isn't a system, or at least the way we're growing corn, we're not going to be going backwards. I got that question one time in a podcast is, well, do you have to sacrifice anything? And my answer is, I really don't think we have to necessarily one way or the other. I think we can do well at all of them. So and the other advantage that I failed to talk about was when you have these corridors and we have a hot, dry summer like this and you have a lot of plant stress, these act like radiator fins. So it helps cool the canopy down, lessen the stress on the crop, and hopefully it'll come through it better. And we saw that in 2012 as well when we do that here. So that's a little bit about how the plants benefit off of the animals. Now the animals going through the middle of the strips, they've got this stuff they graze down. They actually benefit from the corn next to it. So when it gets hot in July, the pigs want to be outside. If it wasn't cloudy right now, you wouldn't see them laying out because they like the shade. the corn grows up and provides shade for the pigs and the sheep so they can be comfortable even on a 90-degree day being outside. So there's just a lot of different interesting things. Some of it we didn't think about when we put this system into place, but we really wanted to have all these plants and animals kind of working back and forth, on one another. One of the things I haven't talked about yet is how the plants actually will feed the animals when we rotate the system. So the intention is we're going to take what we have now this year, we're going to flip it next year so that the crop is planted directly into where all this manure has been. So when we compare this to how we're doing animals in the conventional system right now, we don't have to spread our manure. Our manure is being spread for us. It's laid down right in the spot where we wanted it, and we're going to turn right back around the next year and grow the crop right into that same spot. And the idea where I really want to go with this thing is that we never have grain leave the farm again. Okay, so this year we have just straight corn in our strips. I'd really like to get to the point where we're growing all of our own feed stuff to feed the stocking rates that we have in between. And maybe we get our own feed mixer and or feed grinder like they used to have in years past, and have nothing leave the farm. Now there's some steps to do that. I'm well aware, but I'm very interested in exporting less off my farm or farming out services to other people. That's part of the reason that we've lost a lot of the margin that we have, is because we're willing to farm everything out. And I think that was one of the pitfalls of the ethanol boom, is people just farming things out on the farm. I'm interested in doing more of the work. That was something my dad taught me growing up. And I think there's a ton of opportunity in a system like this to help, capture a lot of that value. So the other point, that I want to talk about is lessening the carbon footprint overall. That's something I woke up at 4 o'clock this morning thinking about this stuff, and I looked on Twitter, and you see the fires out in California and the sky being black and orange. This climate change thing isn't going to go away, and it's going to get real for farmers, especially folks in the Midwest. And there's going to be a huge opportunity to address something like that. When you look at the efficiency of all the things that we're doing without a tillage implement or a four-wheel drive tractor going through here, we're letting the animals do the work. We're not yanking a 10,000 gallon noon tank across, causing compaction, burning fuel. It's all super efficient where everything is just laid out. And I'm, really, really excited about that. So the last part of, our story and kind of where the tenets that drove us is that we wanted to create something that was truly transparent to consumers. Jason was making the comment, Jason's got confinement barns on his property. He was saying, we've got to have these biosecurity zones. Nobody can come in and see. And man, I want to create something that's totally the opposite of that. I think people want to see where their food comes from. And there's nothing more open than what we're doing right here. That's why we spent a bunch of money and put this Wi-Fi bridge. We ran fiber optic cable out along the barn from the house so that we could stream 4K live. And then for those of you that follow us on our Facebook feed, we do that every night. Jordan sets up the camera and on the pen, and we show people exactly what we're doing, how their animals will be raised. So if you imagine this at scale, imagine somebody having, the customer maybe even have their animal prepaid ahead of time, and they would be able to log in and see that exact barn where their animal was being grown, and take away some of those concerns. The other interesting thing around that, a lot of people want transparency, and we had an example of what the opposite side of transparency can look like. The pig in here that we call Tiger Pig in the pen, he's got the tiger spots on him. He came down with strep about a week ago, and he was having a heck of a time even walking. And so, I think a lot of consumers say, well, we don't want any antibiotics in our meat. But if you had a camera on your animals and you saw that your animal couldn't get up that you had purchased, would that change their mind on whether or not we gave them a shot of penicillin to get them back up? Because if we didn't, well, maybe that might be the end of them having a pig for the year. So it's a kind of a reverse concept that I don't think consumers have thought about a lot, but I think it would maybe change their minds on some of these things that farmers get frustrated with on being regulated or over-regulated on too. So the last piece of the consumer thing is that we want to eliminate points between the consumer and the farmer. There's a lot of value that we lose in that chain, and that's probably the hardest piece of this thing when we're going to grow this stuff up and find a way to market it and try to get it direct to consumers. I've got a lot of ideas. I'm not going to go into them as much because we've got Jason Mock here, and he's going to touch on some of those things with what he's been doing over the course of the summer. But I think there's a huge opportunity for that stuff. One of the things that led me to believe that is I've got some friends here in front that I've been butchering pigs with for the last 10 years. And we've invited lots of different people into that experience. And it's really, when somebody's never butchered an animal before or participated in that project, it's really, really something to see the reaction that folks get out when they get involved and involved with that actual process of processing. And I'm really, really excited to find some creative paths to get consumers more involved in not only where their meat comes from, but how their meat comes to be, and maybe have them participate in that as well. So the last couple points here that I have on the sheet are, we want to, if this thing could take off and we could stimulate other businesses, not just farmers that are stock cropping, but imagine, I talked about all the businesses that are gone from our one little town, and wherever you come from, I'm sure your town is the same way. Where you had a lot of businesses a long time ago. But imagine if we could have more lockers. Somebody's to run a business there. More vets. It's hard to find a vet in these parts because there's just not the customer base to with somebody independent like this. So there's tons of opportunities where we can really start to hopefully rejuvenate and hopefully save kind of this way of life. I'm the 5th generation on the Smith farm, and I want to see that there's a way for a 6th. Right now where I'm at, I'm really afraid that it's probably going to end with me until this little project came along, and it gives me a little bit of hope. And I think that's something that we need in this business, and I'm happy to be a part of it. And the last thing I'll say about the barn itself and the system is that we don't want this system to ever be stagnant. The part of the thing I'm most excited about here is shutting up in a little bit and listening to get reactions from people and to see what you think. Because when we're sitting here looking at this thing, we have a one-track mind on it, some tunnel vision. And I'm really interested to hear the other ideas. And that's the thing I wanted with this day is the interaction and the sharing. The criticism, the compliments, it's all kind of one and the same. But we want to have a system that isn't afraid to evolve. It might look completely different next year, and that's totally fine. That's the spirit of what this stock cropping thing is going to be. So I've had a lot of questions. I'm just going to put these down. I've had a lot of questions from folks on kind of what our direction is or what our hopes for the future is with the Cluster Cluck 5000. And my goal next year is I'd like to have 10 of these out on my farm on Highway 9. But what would the ultimate scale look like to me if you had to see, this system on an 80-acre field? What would that look like? So I've developed a schematic to kind of lay that out, and I want to kind of lay it out for you so you can kind of envision it if you have an 80-acre farm, how this would work. We would have our intercropping strips. We would have, on an 80-acre field, we would have 30 barns. Okay, so 30 cluster clucks. And they would be broke in, at least my current schematic is into, the 80 would be divided into segments of thirds that we could move the barns through and rotate and graze the different pasture mixes. And the product, if my stocking rate calculations are similar, to give you an idea on scale, what we would produce off 80 acres, roughly 450 pigs, combination between goats and sheep right now of about 400, and 9,000 chickens. That last one made you chuckle. But so the 9,000 chickens is a lot, but if we had the way that we're going to be set up with our chickens, we had our first crop that already came. I think we'll be able to do 150 per crop and 2 crops of chickens, so 300 per barn set, and that's how we get to 9,000. And then the other piece that we've had criticism on is, well, you don't have cattle. Well, in that 80-acre schematic, we would have laneways in between the strips of corn. We'd have like 120-foot laneways that could be potentially permanent pasture that we could graze cattle on, and have all of those different types of livestock participating on the farm. So folks have said, well, okay, well, is that going to be any better than actually just raising corn or beans, the things that we know how to do? And so I sat down and built a spreadsheet, and the assumptions I made, I put in our estimated costs of what the barn would be, labor of taking care of it, the same cost analysis anybody would do within a livestock enterprise. And the thing that really makes this work is the opportunity to be able to market it at something that is other than a commodity, market price for pork or chicken. And so for my assumptions, what I did is I used average USDA pasture raised pricing because if I would assume that we could to get this to consumers with under that guise. And if you do that with the stocking rates that I talked about, after paying somebody to chore and labor them, the return on investment would be in the six-figure range for an 80-acre piece. So I look at the 80s that I have right now. I've got one a couple miles that way, one a couple miles that way. I'm not going to make six figures with my soybeans this year on those 80s. And so a lot of people have asked, are the financials there if you can make this stuff work? They are, but there's a lot of things in the way of that right now, especially with the processing side. And so where am I going to take 9,000 chickens in Iowa right now and get them processed? It's not going to happen. I think there's 3 processors left in the state. So there's a lot of things, if something like this is going to scale up, it's going to take time. It's going to take change from probably government policy and above to help develop the infrastructure, to fuel the processing that it's going to take to make something like this a reality and be able to deliver this stuff to consumers. So, any questions on those numbers? Crickets?
So what would you change next year that you see that you need to improve on?
So what would I change next year? The question is. The biggest changes would be in our pasture management. We fouled up there. We should have had a couple different mixes. We planted one mix thinking that some of the warm season species would come through after the cool seasons were off, and that didn't happen. So we'll have some different planting dates to ensure that we've got good quality pasture coming through all the time. We're going to change, like I said before, we're going to change the schematic with corn, likely corn and soybeans. Is what it's going to be, with the hope that we could actually process our own feed on site and have it be a true circle. So I think we've got some changes that we're going to make to the barn. We'll talk about that when we finish up down there after Jason's talk and Rick's contributions as well. We'll kind of go through. I'm going to actually hop in the barn and kind of walk folks through that. So any other questions before I?
If you switch from broilers to egg, laying hens, and then had a fence around that you followed behind, I'm just wondering, have you done the numbers if you switch from broilers to eggs to laying hens?
I haven't, no. But I honestly considered trying to find a way to incorporate laying hens into the barn initially, and we settled with just the 4 to kind of limit. So the thing you don't see out here is the chicken tractors, and I should explain that for those. They're sitting where we harvested the chickens out of them in one of the strips, and you're more than welcome to walk down there and see that. But they were trailing 3 days behind on this thing for fly control and to kind of be our cleanup and leveling part of the system. So, any other questions? Yes. So. As long as you can market them at the prices that I suggested, one barn would be, profitable. So.
Do you have the numbers printed out somewhere so we can see them?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Is that coming?
Yes.
Quickly or down the road?
Yeah, so the question is, do I have the numbers? I should have repeated that. The question is, do I have the numbers, and are we going to share it? Yes, I've had it vetted by Practical Farmers of Iowa. I've had one set of eyes from them on it. They thought they looked good. I've had my own personal banker that's an ag looked at it. There's been a positive response there, but I want a few more eyes on it to make sure that I haven't made any wrong assumptions. I'm not an expert in this space. This is our first time kind of, so I don't want to put something out there yet that I'm not 100% confident that, people are going to invest in. But right now, the numbers, even conservatively, look really, really promising. But the key is you have to have them, you have to be able to get them marketed effectively and get in the hands where you can, achieve those prices. So.
Can you talk a little bit about the moving of this, and have you ran into any issues, with or anything?
So the question is, can I talk about the moving of it? So the moving of it, has been, when we started off, the way we did it was we had a winch system that was just anchored to a tractor. And we winched it just with battery power using that. And the treat for all of you folks today is you're going to see this thing move for the first time under its own power with the drive system that we installed here over the Labor Day weekend. So, but as far as moving it, no, we haven't. A lot of folks said, well, hey, when it rains, you're going to get stuck in the mud. We've had this field in strip till and cover crop since 2011. We've got soil structure. If people haven't seen that before, Sunday morning we had 4 inches of rain on this site at 4 in the morning. I came at 8:30 and I hooked up the winch and I moved the barn and I didn't leave a dent in the ground. So. If that was one thing a lot of folks pointed out that they thought we'd have issues with, but we haven't had one issue moving the barn throughout the season, and we're excited about what we have here. This won't be the final version of it, but the autonomous movement of this thing is definitely something that'll be coming next year.
That one's 20 feet wide, right?
Correct, 20 foot wide.
20 foot wide. As far as engineering goes, can you narrow it down to 15 feet and then lengthen it out from an engineering standpoint so you have the same amount of space, but it's just longer and narrower?
I'm looking at my partner and he's nodding yes, that can be done. So
Okay.
the reason we went with 20 was when we were doing our calculations on just how many barns you'd have to have. Initially, it would have worked better for me at 15. But I think from a cost standpoint on the cost per acre of the barn, it worked out to be better at 20. And then when you look at the intercrop, if you know anything about intercrop, 4 rows of corn is about as efficient as it gets for really maximizing your yield. And so next year we'll have 4 rows of corn, 4 rows of beans, and 20 foot of pasture in between. That's at least right now the plan schematic. Nate.
Was there any surprises on the rate of gain with the livestock, or was it as expected?
That's a good question. So, hey Sheldon, I need you up here. He just got a beer. Okay. Where's mine? So the question, Sheldon, is, and the reason I'm asking Sheldon this is because these are his pigs from his herd that we brought down here. And so the question was, is the rate of gain, in your opinion, with this group any different than what you have in the confinement right now?
It's pretty similar, pretty close actually. There's actually a guy here that took 10 pigs out of the same group, and they're raised in a barn with a dirt lot. And they are bigger than these, but these are real similar to what's in our confinement barn as far as size. So they're right on pace where they should be. I think their feed efficiency's been pretty good actually. When Jordan gave me how much you've been feeding them and for what they've gained, so their feed efficiency is really good. So they're obviously getting right where they should be.
What else for questions?
Do you have to run down the cover crop to go put feed in the feeders?
Oh, I see. Okay, that's a good question. The question is, do we have to run down the pasture, the cover crop to put feed in the feeders? So this first year, what we've done is we've come up from behind. Now it's easy because we just have one barn. So honestly, our feed sits behind this white door here, and we march it out over our shoulder. But from the beginning, we had full intentions that if you're going to have 30 of these on a farm, you're going to have a scalable way to chore those. Okay. So what we envision is developing, if I think of Greg Sauter's sprint system from the 360 Yield Center, where you're, taking nitrogen out on a gator, I would envision putting some sort of water system, at least for next year, and a feed system, maybe on a UTV, or maybe a small pickup or something like that. Something we may have to create yet, but.
But if the chickens are behind, how you can't come in from behind, can you? Or is there enough space where the chickens are?
We have some ideas on how to do that. We've talked about it. Either that, or we have to have one heck of a feed auger to make the stretch. But ideally, I think that what we've talked about, we've kind of alluded to the autonomous movement of this. This is further down the road, but we fully intend on probably having the ability to do autonomous choring, where you would just have something running 24/7, running, feed or water, to have a central site that you would come off of. Now, we're probably a ways from that. Next year I won't have that. We'll be figuring out a way to chore stuff and get it that way. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking about different ways to do that.
Sure. Anything else? What other questions? Jamie?
Where are you going to find all these butchers at?
Where are we going to find all the butchers at? It's a great question. Are you going to open up a shop?
No.
No. So Jamie's the guy I butcher with, and he's right. It's that's the biggest challenge. And like I addressed earlier, there's going to have to be things that happen outside of what we're just doing here. There's going to have to be people that can see that there's the business opportunity to open and fill that. And I'm hoping some of the things Jason Mock shares here in a little bit, that'll probably help better illustrate what that opportunity might be and how people step in to fill that gap. People got to make money. And, there's a lot of interest in this space right now with the whole COVID thing. I talked to a butcher the other day that he thinks within 6 months it'll go back to having excess capacity spaces at local butchers. I don't know if I believe in that. Where's my buddy Caleb at? There he is down there. So Caleb's my friend from college, and I talked to him. He was on his way up this morning, and he went home. He's from New Jersey, and he said he went back home out east, and he said every place, he's like, it's just insane. Everyone has chickens in their backyard. And he's like, I've never seen it before, and everyone is getting into the meat business. So I think this thing, it started here in March, but it's going to be interesting to see, and I think there's going to be business opportunities for people that want to be in the meat business. If they have something like this, it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing to fuel it, but we need more of it. I'd love to have a butcher shop in every town in Iowa again. I think it'd be awesome. So, what else? Okay, well, there'll be more time for questions here. We're not going to be done talking about it. So, the thing that I want to leave you with is kind of what is our direction. I haven't really spelled that out in the videos that we've made of kind of where we feel that this business, our potential business, is heading. And our first order of business is we need to get to the point where we can build and manufacture cluster clucks. I don't know. I mean, we've got a couple people here that have already indicated interest. Jason said he wants some. Rick Bieber's here. He said he wanted one. I know I want some for my farm for next year. So we're going to have some iterations of these built. We've got to make some changes to the existing one here, probably lighten it up a little bit, a couple other changes to make it for the automation piece to come in. But we want to get to the point where we can manufacture those. And the interesting thing that we've learned is, the biggest opportunity for this may not even be this field scale study thing that I'm talking about. We've had more interest from acreage owners and people that have moved from the city and want to be able to raise 2 or 3 pigs. So it may not be the Cluster Cluck 5000 that we're selling a lot of next year at this time. It could be the Cluster Cluck 1000. It could be something that's a third of this size. So that's the thing, with our direction, we really don't know. It's really, really young. We really don't know what it is yet, but we know it's something, I guess. And so we're just trying to keep our minds open on where that's going to be. But as far as the model you're looking at now, a lot of the things are going to be around how do we get this thing to the autonomous movement? How do we get this thing to guide itself down in between the strips so that can happen automatically? There's a couple different technologies we're going to be looking at to do that. But that's kind of the path forward. At least the initial path forward is the development of being able to manufacture the barns. So the next thing that we see out is what where I'd really like to go with it is the ability to build a brand around stock cropper meats, where we have the ability to have that name mean something in the marketplace, where you could have a collection or cooperative group of growers that could, all have the same set of standards of what that would look like, market those things together, pool resources, and be able to achieve some of those economies of scale, because maybe we could get to the point where we could get into some of these small processors to get to the scale that it would take to get their attention. And the last thing that, and Sheldon made this point, and I wanted to bring it up, is there's a lot of stuff that we've learned in this that I think can appeal to the part of agriculture that isn't going to take this path. I didn't say that before, but there's going to be two paths in ag with this whole consolidation thing. There's going to be the people that go on the path of scale, and there's nothing wrong with that, because you're not going to have cluster clucks and stock cropping take over the world. Okay, we're not going to replace all the food production in the United States with this system. But we're hoping is that some of the concepts that we're learning in this could be shared with those folks and help improve their operations as well. So it's not a good team or a bad team. It's just, when we look at our opportunities, this is a path more that my family farm is probably going to be more likely to survive and continue on to a sixth generation than for me to scale up. The opportunity probably just isn't going to be there. And I owe it to the 4 generations before to try and keep that going. And so when we're hoping for other families, when I circle it all back and I talk about the 16 families that have all left and aren't part of this anymore, I'm hoping that something like this, whether it's stock cropping or some iteration that somebody else comes up with, helps maintain this way of life that I've loved for the last 41 years. So that is my comments, my presentation. The next speaker that we're going to have come up here is Mr. Jason Mock. And Jason, if you want to make your way. He doesn't need an introduction. If you've been on Twitter, this is the guy that helped put this project kind of on the map back in June. Because we launched it on YouTube and we tweeted things out, but I didn't have a ton of followers. And I remember I was sitting on the toilet actually at my seed shed, and my phone just started to explode after we had tweeted out. It was a couple days after we tweeted out the initial video about the barn, and it just kept dinging and dinging and dinging. And I'm like, what in the hell is happening? And I looked, and here it was. Jason Mock had retweeted this project and said this is the most innovative thing in the history of ag Twitter ever, or some kind of superfluous blessing that he put on it. So Jason's been an awesome supporter. He's an awesome supporter of people in this space. His mantra is to share ideas, put stuff out there, and see what comes back. And he's taught me a lot of things about this. I'm really glad that we've put this thing out into the public space as well. We've gotten, as you say, way more back for doing that, and so thank you for your example. Jason had me out to his field day. He was gracious enough to let me take the stage and tell our story out there in Indiana, and so I wanted to reciprocate and invite him out to our event here and talk and address some of the really cool things that he is doing. He's got a lot of the similar interests to what we do. He just bought a meat company called Muncie Meats, and I wanted him to come out and just shoot from the hip, talk about consumers, your market that you're building, your business, what you think of this, and take it from there. Thanks, boss.
Thanks, Zach. You do better than that. Zach is gosh, it's unreal what he's accomplished in this just past few months. How many YouTube videos have you put out?
I think 20.
20 YouTube videos. This whole stock cropper deal. Wow. Well, we made it. 9.5 hours, both of us. And I'm just shooting from the hip here. I put a little thing on Facebook if you guys want to look at some pictures to kind of follow along if you need that. But if you're not familiar with myself, I farm in Gaston, Indiana, and I am the grandson of 2 farmers that gave it their all. You know, I've got 2 grandpas. I still farm with one, and one just passed. I'll talk a little bit about my motivation to begin with. And first and foremost, y'all coming out here just prove that you're one of the, whether it's the 1%, 5%, 10%, whatever it is, the 90, 95, 99% or whatever is back at the hometown, the coffee shop, just probably bitching and complaining about China or something, or the price of something, and it's all bullshit and all this. And pardon my French, but there's a lot of familiar faces here that I see a lot of places like this, and that says a lot. You know, we're all in this together, sharing ideas, and that's how we're going to get anywhere. So that's a lot there. But I'll talk a little story about one of my grandpas, Papa Lou, I called him. I've got a picture of 1958. They're all standing in the Chevy plant, and they're all looking at this marvelous technology. Just started in Muncie, Indiana. Muncie, Indiana used to have a ton of manufacturing jobs. And it's this Henry Ford mentality, right? He put all this technology together, the assembly line, he made a man's hands 10 times more valuable. And that was powerful. The guy wasn't worth a quarter anymore a day, he was worth $250. And you know, that kind of went on. Both my grandpas really acquired land through the years, and my Papa Lou got a 4520 in 1967 or whatever year that came out. And that John Deere engine that, I don't know, whatever the PTO horsepower, somebody knows out of the top of their head, 127 or whatever it is, it just wasn't strong enough. So he took it out and he put a Detroit in it. And you knew he was plowing. He could pull it faster, but it's so damn loud. It's just like a Gleaner combine. You could just hear it from 5 years away, or 5 miles away, just, but he could pull it another gear, another mile an hour. And that was what was important, right? In the 60s and 70s, it was just straight raw horsepower. Every ad, even the furrow now has got nice gardening stories, and then the ad is the 620 horsepower tractor, right? So what's going on there? But anyway, that's one-dimensional thinking, just horsepower acres and acres. Just let her eat. You know, and then we just started arguing. We added that's one-dimensional thinking, went to two-dimensional thinking, which is kind of, you wake up in the morning and you got this to-do list, and you're like, you know, if it's April 22nd, it's dry, you're going to plant corn, and you're going to plant corn until you can't keep your eyes open anymore, and then you're going to wake up way too early and, you know, drink some coffee, maybe smoke a cigarette if you're into that, but just keep your body cranking and get as much done as possible, because that's just what we do, right? That's two-dimensional thinking. You wake up and it's urgency and importance. And what happened to me was I came back to the farm, in the worst case scenario, I farmed with my dad, but there just wasn't room for myself on the farm. You know, I could sweat it out and make $8 an hour, but I just got out of college, and so I went out in the real world and then started a landscape business, and I'd help my dad, but I always wanted to farm with him, but I never had the opportunity. Because I found out when I was 29 he had pancreatic cancer, and it just sucked. But the next 4 months I had to be next to him because I had to take his place. So went through that, and the first few years of farming, I'm like, you know, this is just what we do. We just wake up in the morning and we just kill our bodies, get as much done as we possibly can, and man, if I could just get 10 more bushel of corn, man, that would really pencil out better, and blah, 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 you know, all that stuff. And then I finally settled down a little bit, found the best thing that ever happened to me with my wife, had kids right away, and then I'm thinking, man, I'm working all the time, and they're sitting here and they're not with their dad. This doesn't make much sense. And then a few years later, my kind of next biggest man in my life, my uncle, just found out he had brain cancer. So they both passed at 53, and now I've got my homestead, and then I drive east, which is, we call Louis land, going back to Papa Lou. His only son, Louis, is gone, and you know, I was telling Monty last night over beer, whoever farms that next is going to do the exact same thing. They're going to work the ground, plant corn, and you know, the price is what it is. If it rains, then it makes what it was, and it's it's not very fulfilling. So I started to really make myself a little vulnerable. And it started when I lost my father. I went down to a lot of farms because I was nervous. I had all this responsibility to put out a crop on 3,000 acres, and I was a landscaper, not a farmer, and I had to learn. But this whole vulnerability thing is big, because if you can get out of the way of yourself and your ego and open up ideas, then what's amazing is everyone else does the same thing. And when we're all in this mindset where it's not about me, it's about us and what the options are, then it's beautiful how speedy we can learn and move it forward to what we really want to do, which is connect with people in the community and rebuild all these places that are leaving, right? So this is the third dimension, is the significance calculation. Significance is giving yourself the emotional permission to work on things today with other people that are going to be important tomorrow. Significance calculation is all about elimination. Because if you can eliminate things, you can't make time, you got to spend time, but if you can eliminate things, you don't have to do that next year, tomorrow, whatever. So if you can eliminate, if you can delegate, delegating's hard, right? Because we think we got to do it or somebody else is going to screw it up. Well, the first time we did it, we screwed it up. So if I have Tyler do something, he might not be as good right off the bat, but if he's all for team whatever, because we have a good relationship, he's going to get just as good as me or probably better. And then that frees me up to do something else. So that's the second one, delegation. Next is automation. You're working on that right now. That's what you're excited about, is just moving that building and not having to do that work. And what was the other one? I don't know, but this is what we're trying to get after here, is significance. And it just all starts with making that choice to be vulnerable and talk about things that I'm talking about up here. Just be yourself. So I'll get into a little bit of nitty gritty. I kind of started with the relay cropping thing, and we had an opportunity this summer we reached out to several meat companies, and a guy wanted out. This COVID thing happened, and there was a nice infrastructure piece here where we have a lot of cold storage and processing, so we purchased a meat company. And right away, we were kind of mavericks a little bit. We went to Rural King and threw some shelves in there, and we started selling meat out of the truck at a sweet corn patch, and it was going all right. And what we're really envisioning, hopefully, in the future with all this, is to create something exactly as Zach was talking about, where, it doesn't have to be the, 15,000 killed pigs in a mega factory, kill plant. Why can't we empower these regional kill plants and do things exactly like you're seeing up here with his Wi-Fi and cameras? Why can't people see their food being grown and share the whole thing instead of saying, keep out? Here's your invitation for our open house. And connect with people. So we've got several ideas on how we can do this. We were at Monty Bottom's yesterday with Grateful Grays. He's really made some headways in the last couple years with subscription meat, and we're talking about a mobile kill trailer that could go around. It's just the beginning, and this is why we come here, is to share these ideas. So I don't want to take up too much time, because we need plenty of time to discuss all this stuff on everyone's mind, and just encourage everyone to open up about that. But one idea that I'm more excited than anything, and it's not really proprietary technology, but Amazon lockers, that technology is going to allow people to basically, we can queue order. So we want to create a Muncie Meats, an open room where several farms can have their products. So we may, on our farm, have 3 or 4 different meats, but someone's cheese and someone's milk and Zach's stock cropper or whatever, how we do it, we can queue these ATM machines, but instead of ATM, it's automated farm market machines all throughout, hopefully our region. We can use social media and Twitter to really act like Muncie or Gaston, Indiana is everything, and hopefully this will spread to different regions. But anyway, hopefully I touched on that a little bit and that was sufficient, but I really want to watch this thing move. So anyway, let's have a good time and feel free to come up and ask any questions and just put yourself out there. So thanks for having me. There you go, Zach.
Cat. There he is. So I think what we want to do next is we want to give Rick some time. So Rick Bieber is, I didn't know him until we launched this project, but Rick is kind of an expert in this space, way more than I. He came out last night and taught me more in about 45 minutes than I've probably learned in the last 10 years on this space. But he's traveled the world. He's from northwestern South Dakota. He drove a long ways to be here. And one of the things that he wanted to set up is talk about, I talk about how we're able to move this barn after a 4-inch rain, and he's going to talk through some of the soil health pieces around the different parts of the management of this system and how it impacts some of those infiltration things. He did some really cool studies or some experiments this morning, and I'm going to invite him to guide us through that path and talk for the next little bit here.
Thanks, Zach. I'm definitely not an expert. I'm a farmer that's retired a couple years ago, and my son's taken over the farm after 5 generations. There's a couple words I heard this morning that are very, very important, and the first one was the start off of this whole day, why? And Jason uttered the second word, relationships with humans. And that's what it's all about. Just imagine if you had 10 stock croppers with your vision at 9,000 chickens per 10 farmers. That's 90,000 chickens. If you do the math backwards, that's about 350 chickens a day you have to butcher. That's about 4 jobs in your community. Wow. Off how many acres? 80 acres each? 320 acres. You have the 4 people that own the chickens, all made good incomes, and then you have 4 more jobs in your community, plus all the freight and things like that that go along with it. This is what it's about. We all look at things and want to scale them to who we are. Our farm went broke way back a lifetime ago, and we worked out things to learn how to farm without any money. And we did a fair job of doing that. And then all of a sudden Mother Nature is kind of cruel to us out where we're at. We'll wind up with 100 inches of snow and all that stuff for 6 months out of the year. And we had people just walk off the land, and the land stood idle and the weeds grew on it. So we started picking up land. And we go from what we considered small acreage of what I grew up on to large acreage of 10s and 20s and 30s and 40s of thousands of acres. It's simple to get big. Another 60-foot seeder and another tractor and another employee. It's hard to get smaller, and we're trying to get smaller. Everybody wants to scale to what you have. Why wouldn't you scale to the income you dream to have? And after that, release land to young people that want to come back to the farm and be a mentor to them. And it all starts with the 16 farmers you had in the area at one time. I'm quite sure at that time, 50 years ago or whenever it was, 70 years ago, there were more than 2 crops grown in your area. And now we've got, with our technology driven by Big Ag, telling us we should grow 2 crops. Big Ag would actually like us just to grow 1, because that makes it simple. So you're growing corn and beans. And corn and beans is not a rotation. According to Paul Yassa out of the University of Nebraska, that's an oscillation, back and forth and back and forth. An oscillation has a hard time running smoothly. So what's happening here, my grandmother told me way back a lifetime ago, is my father's mother. She told me maybe I should farm more like God does, because he won't let his crops die ever because of drought or too much rain. And maybe I should farm less of what my father's doing. And that's when we started this journey 35 years ago. So we've been playing on what you guys are standing on there with the cover crops. We've been playing with them for about 20 years. And we probably know about 5% of what we should know about cover crops. But we ask why an awful lot. And we go to our soils to learn why. And we wanted to dig a soil pit for you guys to look at the soils from the bottom up, because we always want to look at things from the top down. And you know what happened to our government when they want to deal with things from the top down? Look at our country today. It should be driven from the bottom up. So we should look at our soils and learn from them, rather than try to look at the crops and force things. That's reductionist thinking, looking from the top down. When you go to the bottom and look up, that's holistic thinking. And that's when you start dreaming like what Zach's doing here and Jason's doing there. And each and every one of you guys that are standing out here, you came here for a reason. You drove the miles for a reason. I'd venture to bet we have 10,000 miles driven today to get here, between all of us. Jason's 600 and some, I'm 500. And then we have Oklahoma and Kansas and these people too. So I went out and I dug some soils out of the cornfield across the way over here. And if you're in the audience, I apologize for stealing a shovel full of dirt and bringing it over here, but I brought it over here and it's represented there. And I took and did some infiltration tests on it. If you guys have never seen the infiltration test, what it is, it's a ring driven into the ground, and right here's where it's at. And what it is, it tells us how much rain we can put in the ground as rapidly as we can. So that 6-inch cylinder that's in the ground there, if you take one bottle of water and you take one sip out of it, that's an inch of rain. And you dump it in there and you do the measurement, how fast it'll go on the ground. That's what your infiltration rates are. And USDA's got this all perfected like everything. The government always comes in and does this. We've been doing this on our farm since 1996, these infiltration tests, and measuring CO2 releases and stuff like that. So across the way over here, the neighbor's corn, it took 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Yep, gotta make sure I'm reading the right ones here. Took 2 minutes and 10 seconds for that to infiltrate on the neighbor's corn, the first inch. And the first one's not a big thing. You gotta remember, Zach said they had 4 inches Sunday morning, right? Last Sunday. And what, do you guess, maybe a third to a fourth here in the last 24 hours?
We've had 5 inches since Sunday morning here.
Okay. So we can get water to go in for us. And across the way, the neighbor's corn over there, it went in 2 minutes and 10 seconds, the first inch. The second inch took 9 minutes and 10 seconds to go in the ground. Okay, the soybeans right here of Zach's, which are soybeans on corn, right? Okay, the first inch was 3 minutes and 10 seconds, and the second inch was 9 minutes and 40 seconds. Okay, Zach's corn right over here was 3 minutes and 15 seconds right here, and that's corn on corn strip tilled 2 years in a row, right? The soils are right up here. And the second inch was 5 minutes. And that's pretty standard from every place I go. That's pretty standard. Okay, when you go out into the cover crop, I went out into that one right there, drove it in, and the first inch went in a minute and 4 seconds. The second inch went in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Okay? So I went down here and I did another one right down here. And that one there I couldn't quite believe. The first 1 inch went in the ground in about 9 seconds. The second inch went in the ground, took about 30 seconds. The third inch went in the ground in about 45 seconds. The fifth inch went in the ground and took a little over a minute. Right down here in the low ground. Isn't that what we want? Is we want our ground, if it's going to have water shed off, we want it to go in faster and faster and faster as it goes down the stream. So that way we don't lose any of the water that comes to us. But that's what an infiltration ring is. And right here is the soils. And right here is the cover crop soil that has a tremendous amount of aggregation to it. It just falls apart in your hand. It fell apart to where I couldn't hardly even bring it up here. It's like chocolate cake, which is what you want to have happen. Here's what you kind of don't want to have happen. This is Zach's corn on corn that is strip tilled, and everything's done according to strip tilling, but we wind up with plates out there. And why them plates happen is that's a biological death is what it is right there. Okay? Because you have corn, a warm season grass, 2 years in a row, feeding the biology that the warm season grass feeds. And all the other biological components within that soil starve. And that plate right there is where a family that was representing to hold that soil in more of an aggregation died. And now when you get that inch of rain that comes down and it sets on top of the soil, 1 inch of rain per acre weighs 110 tons per acre, plus however much this soil weighs. So you have weight, and then you have an implosion of a system that falls apart. So Zach said he planted 5 different species out here, okay? And as we're walking through that, he's got 3 of the 4 species planted. There's a warm season grass and a cool season grass, and a warm season broadleaf and a cool season broadleaf, and that's every plant on the face of the earth falls into those 4 categories. Okay, so he's planted his crop out there, but along with it, he left some voids because there's hundreds and hundreds of species of plants that grow on the North American continent. So the voids he left, that the biology says I want to have that plant, your Mother Nature put it out there for you. Okay? It's not bad because what he's doing is he's finding a way to harvest it. Right there they are. Okay? If you're into corn beans, you have to spend money to get rid of that. Zach is making money getting rid of that. Okay, right here's a pea plant and a brassica plant, kale, forage rape. Zach planted them out there. They're cool season broadleaves, okay? And he planted them early enough and then they got grazed off so they come back. But he left a void because right here is common mallow, right? That's a cool season broadleaf also. So perhaps you want to plant something to fill this void also. Okay? So if you get into the warm season side of things, you have cowpeas planted and soybeans planted out here. Okay? Right there they are. But there's a bit of a void because right there's your pigweed, Palmer amaranth, same thing, or in my world it is. And you have the lamb's quarter out there. So you left a void there again. So perhaps next year we can look at trying to fill those voids so all those things go away. And believe it or not, I've been on farms throughout the world where farmers have figured that out. For once they have their system put together with all the plants they want to have out there, now all of a sudden they don't have any undesirable plants anymore. And these undesirable plants, when we were walking around here this morning, he goes, well, they really don't like to eat that palmer or the red root pigweed. The sheep don't anyways. And about 5 minutes later, we're standing here visiting, we're looking over there, and the goats got their heads sticking out the hole, eating the red root pigweed. So certain animals eat certain things, and other animals don't eat other things, okay? And Zach talked about all the things that he's doing with his animals above ground, and it's great you guys come to see that. And we are visual people. We want to see things. So that $850,000 combine John Deere come out with, I'm sure just about everybody's climbed up on it and hung their tongue out already about, God, wouldn't that be great? But you forget about the littlest things that drive the world. If you ever read about the aquatics of the world, as soon as the plankton in the ocean starts suffering, the populations go down or go up, the whale population fluctuates. Funny how things are connected, they're interconnected. So when we look below the ground, we have our worms down there, and there's gobs of them here. But they're the biggest thing below the food chain, but they have to eat something. So they eat the fungal components, and they eat things like that. So getting back to our plants, we have all these different plants that feed different biological components within the soil. Okay, I have an analogy. Should I use my analogy?
I'll leave it up to you.
I have an analogy that is a bit to the point, but it usually makes the point. Is that if we look at our above ground livestock, we understand them. And we understand a male and female. And in order for that life to come forward below ground, you have to have a sperm meet an egg. Okay? And that only happens in nature when a penis is involved. Okay? So an elephant's penis is very big and a mouse's penis is very small. But both of them have a job to do, right? So a big plant like that tree has a job to do, and that very, very small plant has a job to do. And its jobs are the exact same thing as the elephant's penis job is to take one cell, a sperm cell, and put it deep within the life to create life when it joins an egg. And that doesn't matter if it's an elephant or a mouse. And it's the same way with these plants. They have a job. It's to take the carbon cell, the exact same carbon cell, between this and a grass plant. But they put a marker on it. And that marker makes it so that the biology will eat one or the other. But not both. Okay? And when you take semen and put it in a petri dish and look at it, you can't tell an elephant's semen from a mouse's semen by looking at it. You can tell it with DNA. You can't tell the carbon molecule from this plant to this plant by looking at it under the microscope. You can do it with DNA. Okay? These guys here's job is to take that carbon cell out of the atmosphere and put it in the ground and feed biological components within the ground. Now if you take and mix all them semen cells together and impregnate the elephant's female and the mouse's female and the zebras and giraffes, the appropriate female is going to get pregnant with the appropriate semen. That's God's design right there. But you can force a wolf and a fox to breed because they're both the same animal. They're canine. So we can do that with our corn. We can force millet to feed the biological family within the soil that the corn plant would. But it's not a great design to do that. Why not have both of them there? Bringing life to life. Now here's the interesting thing. We all know the story of Noah and his ark. Just imagine if Noah was a farmer. What he had done is went out and got all the females of the world and put them on that ark. And he'd have got the smallest male that he could have because he needed the semen cell. That'd have been efficient, wouldn't it? And then he'd have impregnated all the females. And he'd only had to build the ark half as big, and he'd have saved half the feed. That's what farmers are doing. Is they're going, okay, I have a corn plant out there, I'm sequestering carbon, everything's getting fed. It is not getting fed because it's all blocky. We have death. But when we get into the cover crop, where you got all the diversity happening, we don't have the blockiness because we have life. We're feeding everything. I hope none of this offended any of you. I don't mean it to offend any of you. Sometimes life has to be brutally honest. And sometimes the analogies get a little bit rank to make them be brutally honest, so that people can start realizing that we can't just have monocultures out there anymore, or else our communities fall apart. Because that's what's happening. And as soon as we start bringing all this diversity that you're looking at out here, that you're standing on, every one of you are standing on diversity. And every one of you, we've had 5 inches of rain. Every one of your shoes are spotlessly clean. And you can walk anywhere out there in diversity and your shoes are spotlessly clean. As soon as you step into any one of these monocultures, your shoes get muddy. It's so obvious once you start happening to your system and you start understanding that diversity it's the glue that holds the communities together, whether it's below ground or above ground. And we cannot just feed the blonde-haired people, or just the gray-haired people, or just the redheads. We have to feed everybody. And some of you want to have lettuce, and some of you want to have chickens, and some of you want to have steak for supper. So we make it all for you. Just imagine if the restaurant only served one food. Boom, you walk in there and that's that. So once we get these systems going, like what Zach's got going on here, and we've been playing this with on our farm, is we don't have near this going on. We just have cows on our place. But we can stock up big time with cows because we got a lot of them. But once we have these 5 different soil care principles in place, there's 5 of them: soil armor, integration, diversity, what do we have? Living roots, feeding biology 365 days a year through a blank.
Keep it covered.
Keep it covered. Okay, when we have all them happening, so the soils are protected. Now all of a sudden you have the things flourish. And when you talk to people like Dr. Christine Jones from Australia, and our soils are showing it on our farm when we draw the nutrients out, the total nutrients out there, we haven't fertilized for 5 years now, and all of our nutrient levels are going up on the farm. And there's no added anything. And the numbers are going up. Why? There's scientific data that shows why, explaining why. But somebody has to give first. We've taken it all away. Piece by piece, we've taken it away from nature. Don't you think we should start giving it back to nature rather than just say, nope, I got to keep giving, and my 250 bushel corn doesn't pay the bill, so, yep, Jason, if we get 10 more bushels, we can get more corn, right? And you know what we do? We sit back and then we scan the paper and, okay, there's some land coming up for sale, and us gray-haired farts go to the land sale and outbid the young guy. That isn't good for the community. So I'm sorry I'm getting negative on you guys, but it's reality. And I've seen it happen. Our communities totally fall apart where we have nothing left except an elevator to put the grain on the rail. So I think I'll end. So before I start crying.
Give Rick a hand.
Thanks. What I want to do now is I want to kind of divulge into conversation down around the pen. And the thing that I kind of alluded to on Twitter was we had a surprise for you. You know, we talked about how we moved this thing earlier this season with the winch and mechanical with something pulling on it. You know, if this thing is going to scale, we wanted to be able to demonstrate that you could do that. And so if you want to congregate, I'm going to work my way down here, and I'm going to mask up just so I can be close to folks. Sheldon, where are you at? Sheldon, come on down. So what we envision with this thing is that it's got to be able to be powered on its own. And so what we've done is we've rigged up this drive system, and this was kind of a combination of wild ideas. What we actually have here is tarp motors off of a semi-trailer. We bought 2 brand new tarp motors. And Sheldon rigged up this drive system to go off of wheels and the chains, and we got that machined up right top of the pen. And we wanted to show that this thing could move on its own. And so we have a battery pack up here. For today's purposes, we don't have the solar panel hooked up, but you can fully imagine what that would look like. That the sun would shine down, we charge our batteries, and then, oh, that's right, Jordan's got to move. I'll keep talking here while he gets, we got to shut the sheep up first. Forgot the first step of the process here. So I got juice around. He always makes up for my lacking eye juice. So we swing our mobile pen up. In the future, if you're looking like, oh, we're not going to have a man out there, how's that going to be? We're going to redesign the front of the pen so that it can move on its own. So Sheldon is crossing his fingers, and he's going to see what happens here if we can make this thing go on its own.
Yeah!
So you can see in the back, we kind of rake it down a little bit here, kind of help level it out. You guys are watching the first. It's never moved this far before. We wanted to see how far it could go. That's 11 feet. It worked. It all goes to Sheldon. He designed all that stuff, and we did it on the cheap, just to try to have that proof of concept that this thing is truly possible. And we've got a lot of ideas on how this will change. It will not look like this on a further model. We've got a lot of ideas on how that's going to happen. But what we wanted to do now is just kind of open things up. We don't have a lot of other things planned for as far as presentation, but this is the part that I'm hoping we're going to get the most out of, is just the exchange of the ideas and the questions. So I'm going to have Sheldon sit down here in the pen with me, and if folks want to gather around, and if you want to ask questions, we can talk about the design of the barn. Whatever folks want to stay around and talk, we will honor that as long as possible, and curiosity exists. So,
First question.
do the pigs always go to the same spot after we open up after the move? The answer is yes. And the reason is because their spent feed that comes out of the feeder is sitting there in the soil, and they just absolutely go. You can see it right here, what they do. So one of the interesting things when the COVID thing hit, I'll share this story. I got some pigs from a friend that needed some to get butchered for other folks, and we gave them away essentially. And when I introduced those 5 pigs that had never seen dirt before to soil, they come out of a confinement, and I let those pigs into my pasture over my acreage. All they did was eat dirt for an hour and a half. They weren't interested in anything else. They just gnawed at the soil to get something. So I'd never seen that before as a farmer. You know, the pigs I've raised have always been on dirt, but when they've never seen them, their innate reaction is to get something that's in the soil that they're not getting in that hog barn. So, and this is every morning, this is what they do.
said you did something with 60-inch rows a few years ago.
Yes.
Do you think that would fit into this system here?
So the question is, I did something with 60-inch rows a few years ago. Would this fit? Possibly, but it would be really, really small cluster clucks to go in between. You know, we kind of considered that, and we've seen a lot of that floating on the internet, but from a scalability and having something that you know, moves on its own and has enough animals in it where you can have the multiple species, it's pretty hard to put a single pen and a single animal in a 60-inch spacing. So that's why we kind of went with the width that we have here. So some of the other things that we included in the design was we wanted the ability to get the animals up and out of inclement weather or mud. And so like the last couple days have been a great example of that. It was really the first time when we had that 40-degree temp. So we've got this tenderfoot flooring, and yes, that adds weight to the rig, but it allows it for them to be inside, be completely dry, have the manure fall through the slats. And the other nice thing is when we want to get the pen, you know, take the pigs and move them all at once, like when we came out and we spun this thing, we put them all up on the wheels, we pick the thing up and we move it. And you don't have to worry about things getting out.
So when you see that feeding response, how do you mimic that?
I don't know, other than throwing the feed out here and just letting them go nuts at it all the time. You know, Jason's doing that with his chickens. You know, you've been spreading your feed out, letting them scratch and go after it. And yeah, this is a great example. Maybe we need to change. Maybe we don't need to have a feeder in there at all. We just need to have something automatically feeder down the ground. So.
How often do you feed and water them?
How often do we feed and water them? So the tanks that we put in, we did the math on what we could hold based off the surface area going into our gutter, and 110 gallons. So we figured we could take, Sheldon, what was it like 9/10 of an inch?
Yeah, it's a little over an inch.
A little over an inch that we could harvest off of. So that capacity, if it's full, it depends on the heat. When it was really, really hot, they really drank a lot more. We had to be out here, Juice, what was it when it was out? Was it twice a day that we were filling? But now that things have cooled off, when I was choring, when Jordan was gone over the Labor Day weekend, I think I went 2.5 days before, and then the rain came and then added it, so I didn't have to do chores, or didn't have to add water. As far as the feed, when we first started out, you know, the sheep and the goats, we just have a kind of a maintenance crate feed in there. We don't fill that very often. We want them to be browsing and getting most of their stuff from outside. And with the pigs, I think now we're putting about 50-pound sack in once a day. So, but when we designed everything, we wanted to have the flexibility that if you could get out there from a weather standpoint, that you could go 2 days. At least we wanted to have 2 days of feed supply on the barn at all times. So.
Zach,
Yes.
your animals are driven off, like everything, are driven off carbon. That's what they eat, carbohydrates, proteins, amino acids, things like that. And once we get our soil balanced properly and get the plants out there properly, the carbohydrates and things that your animals are going to need for the animal that you want to have happen at the growth stage it needs to, you're going to be able to do with the plants. Because all you're doing right there in your feeder is you have stored carbohydrates in there. Why not just grow them? And maybe you just have to move faster, slow it up and down according to what you want to have happen with your animals.
I guess that's my next question. How well, I know you're probably going to laugh, but how well will the hogs do or the sheep do on a single species versus 5 or 6 species? If I've only got a single species out there. Or, I mean, and I've got hogs, you know, if I've got the feeder full all the time and I got 1 or 2 species, how is that going to be different? Will that work the same? Will that, I mean,
This sounds really dumb. I don't know, because this is the only thing that I've ever tried out here. You know, when I struck out, we tried to decrease the odds of failure by adding as much diversity as possible. And I worked with some folks that had experience in this space around pasture-raised pork. I told them what I was doing. nobody had ever done this before, so they did their best to try to give us a mix that would achieve the goals we were after.
Do you think for hog, clover, if it was clover dominant versus grass dominant, did you know from talking to anyone whether a clover dominant would have hurt or worse or better for the hog?
So the question is, clover dominant versus grass dominant, would it make a difference specifically with pigs? I don't know that information. You know, like I admitted at the beginning, I'm not a livestock guy. I'm becoming one slowly here. I'm not a forage expert. It's kind of been my guess by golly. I wish I had a better answer for you than that, but that's the truth.
The key to this whole system is we're looking at the visual, but we have to remember we have to capture the water that God gives us. Most of us don't have a sprinkler to put it on where we want. So the quicker we can get that in the soil, and as soon as you start limiting your above ground growth to monocultures or polyculture, two of them, you're starting to have soil collapse and infiltration rates are going to suffer.
But I'm looking at the big picture too. I'm looking at the whole rotation. You know, so I'm looking at this corn here and corn in a strip, and I'm looking at the different, different rotations where you're changing the rotation so you're putting more crops in the rotation. You may not put as many crops in between the strips, but you know what I'm saying?
Yes. And I have the same, I know where you're going on it.
I'm talking interseeding, corn, that type of thing.
Yes.
So,
And that's you know, we spent all of our energy, to be honest with you, on this. This was, I've got a ton of ideas that, you know, when we have more attention, once we get this figured out, that we can do with not only corn, but soybeans.
corn and soybeans, both. Yeah.
So we're just, good comments though.
Question for you, Zach. One is, how fast does it take for this to regrow?
So the question, that's a great question. Thank you, because I didn't talk about that with our script. So the question is, how fast does it take this to regrow? So if you look at this middle strip is where we started. This was our first pass. And this would have been, we started on June 15th, and we got through this. It took about a month to get through that point. We're moving one move a day, so 11 feet a day, 311 feet long, so roughly about 30 days to get through it. And you can see what has recovered. And so the Sudan grass that was in our original mix had enough time to get going. You can see down on the far end, that stuff's 9 to 10 feet tall. And you can see the progression when we came out. We came over to this run here and went down, and you can see what the regrowth looks like. And if you want to see where we came out last Thursday night, it's the far strip down there. And so a lot of that far strip looks similar to this. And if you go out there and walk, you can see, I believe it's oat shoots that are coming up through already. I was pretty concerned about some of the damage the pigs were doing. We were moving the pen twice a day. They were still doing a lot of what I would consider damage. Some people consider it, natural tillage. But when I walk through it now, there's a couple spots where we caught some of the rains. We have some wallows. That's something we're gonna have to figure out, is how do we manage that. We did try bringing the pigs earlier. That did not work. I've never done it before. It's a hell of an experience if you've never done it. They make a lot of interesting noises, but it's pretty short-lived. But the thing is that they worked the rings out and we're back to going again. But maybe somebody today that knows more about pig breeding can tell me what I did wrong. I don't know that I want to do that. If we can solve that problem, if we had this system to be automated where we can move it a foot every couple hours, maybe that's the way we overcome that, to keep the thing constantly moving. I have ideas on how many feet I need, but until this thing can move on its own, I really don't know if I know what's possible with how we can manage it. That's what next year's for. I'm looking forward to it.
Is it math that got you with the 3 strips for this set of livestock, or did you match your barn to this acre that you were donating to the project?
Yes, so the question is, how did we arrive at the math with building the barn, the area? We started with a stocking rate, I guess, on how many animals we wanted to have, and we did some calculations on how much pasture we thought with that stocking rate, if we're moving it daily, we could support. And then we had this is where I normally do my Pioneer seed plot. It's 311 feet long. It's a nice place to do that. It's off the beaten path. I didn't have to worry about kids coming out, turning everything loose, being protected a little bit. And so we did our lengths. We figured we needed 85 days of movement or something, at least, to get us started before we came back. And so we put in the 3 strips to kind of match that calculation. Now, in hindsight, we probably needed another strip or 2, because when we went to the 2-a-day movement, that changed everything. And that, for next year, when I'm thinking about if we scale this a mile that way on the major highway, where the 2-a-day thing or continuous movement is going to have to be some flexibility we build into it.
Is that movement rate tied to their size? Do you think you'd move it twice a day?
So the question is the movement rate tied to the size? And initially, so I will say yes. Now initially when we planned it, we didn't think that well out ahead. We should have. With the first run we did came through, it was a move a day, and that was about right. Okay. But when we got in the second run, when things got bigger, there was more disturbance. Our pasture strip there was not as good. And so they grazed stuff down more, and so then we went to the 2-a-day moves, and we went 2-a-day moves through that strip. So that only took a little over 15 days to get through that strip. So that's where having the ability to, move it faster. And the other thing that I didn't talk about, but you think about when an animal's small, when we start all these, and how many pounds of manure are you getting out? There's going to be a linear, curve there of how that's distributed. And so, how do you balance that long term with having uniform manure distribution in the field? So those are things we're going to have to go through.
How are you going to market these 90 pigs?
So the question is, how are we going to market these 9 or 10 pigs? So we're open right now, and that's been somewhat intentional. We wanted to kind of see what was going to happen. We wanted to have this field day. We wanted to see what people were interested in as far as participating, or butcher shops that saw our story and wanted to partner with that. So now that the field day is over, that's going to go into high gear because these things are going to be ready for market. But the FFA chapter is over here. One of the ideas that we had was partnering with the FFA chapter. If they've never seen something butchered before, partner with a butcher outfit or somebody that knows how to do it, teach the kids, and so we get some education out of it as well. But if anyone is interested in any of these animals, everything you see here is for sale. We've got chickens in the freezer up there. We've got like 20 of them that we brought over. So if anybody wants some of the chickens that we raised, butchered 10 days ago, hook us up on that. You can talk to Mandy wherever she went, and she'll be happy to serve you up. But that, we're open right now on the plan. But we've got a lot of things cooking. There's a lot of interest in the backside of the stuff. But we'll have to figure that out in the next couple of weeks. We'll talk to Jason wherever he went. There he is. Jason's talked about putting, maybe we butcher some and put them in to take them out to Muncie and sell them through his system as well.
Do you anticipate in the future any intersitting between corn, then after you combine the corn, running pigs through the corn stuff over after harvesting, and harvesting the cover crop in between the corn? So that
the question is, are we going to do anything with interseeding in corn and then grazing pigs into corn? I don't know if we would do pigs. I'd be more interested if we were going to come back and clean up with cattle for a time to come through and clean up the stalks and anything else.
So you'd rather use that?
I'd rather probably use cattle. I don't know if there's good thought behind that. That's my reaction.
Zach, I was going to ask about talking species of cover crops and things before. Have you thought about putting a cedar on this thing that you can change the blend in throughout the season?
Yeah. So Jason, when he got here first, that was the first conversation we had. Was he's like, "Man, you got this perfect thing to seed into right away. Why don't you have that
built in. So yeah, it's a great
Or
idea.
even while the animals are out there, if it's a big seed, they'll eat some of it.
Right.
They'll trample in a lot of it too.
Well, one of the ideas we had was if you had the cedar that was here and it was activated when the thing moved and it would spread, you know, so the pigs couldn't, you know, get to it. But this background action here where this thing kind of levels and moves it out, there'd be enough seed, you know, soil contact with a lot of it. You might be able to get another flush established.
Use one of those little spitters or those game feeders with the timers.
Right, right. Yeah, that could all be, I mean, it'd be very easy to drive something off all the wheels that we have here. What else for questions?
Do you have this on?
Talk about driving, it goes straight.
Yep.
Do you make a circle of this at some point where you've got variable speed drive or something to steer it?
Yes, so the question is how will we steer this thing when we get to the ends? The thought is that we will, you know, right now for the demonstration today, it was just tied together in motors. We just hit go and they went. But yes, fully anticipate having some kind of variable speed drive that we could have. You know, we were kind of hoping we'd be able to pull that off for today, where we would have like a joystick control that you could either manually do it. You know, say if you had 5 barns and you just wanted to go out and move them yourself. You know, you wouldn't need to have the fully automated option, but the idea would be is, you know, especially at least for daily movement, the dream would be able to activate them from your iPhone and have some sort of sensor or eye system on here that would talk back to the controller, which would speak to the motors as far as driving. So,
You have this on, you said you designed this on CAD, is that what you did? So
Sheldon did, yeah.
you have all that on computer, so you could give that information if we wanted to build it ourselves?
If we desired to, the question is, would we give the information out? So the thing I'll say, the Cluster Clutch 5000 in June, we filed provisional patents for everything that you see here.
So you won't let people build it?
I guess I don't want to comment on that yet. So, what else for questions? Yeah, Neil.
Is Amazon Locker a thing, or did Jason invent that?
Jason. The question is Amazon Locker a thing, or did you invent that?
No, I didn't invent it. We're just, no one's really, no, it's just, it goes on in the city, so no one's really used that system to market small niche local products, kind of collaborate and put it together. So, you know, that's kind of the position to be, the more bigger your network to create.
You said you were using units per dollar figures on what is the percentage there compared to regular pricing?
Yeah, so the question is on the how does pasture pricing compare to regular meat pricing? And so I'll just give you the relative example that I have in my spreadsheet for the price of pork. The average USDA price of hanging weight pork for pasture raised is $3.50 a pound in June. Okay, it's about the same for chicken. I think goats were $8 a pound, and I can't remember where sheep was. That was less than that. That gives you kind of, you know, if you got commercial animals, you know what the difference is. So I'll say this, that's an average. You know, I think there's a lot of room, you know, in that, but I think there's a lot of opportunity about where the commercial side is right now. So,
Is that hanging weight or on the
hanging
boat?
weight, yes.
Okay.
What else for questions? Sheldon juice, what am I forgetting?
It can be. The mobile processing was brought up.
Yes.
Has anybody had any experience with that?
So the question is mobile processing. Has anyone had any experience with that? Jason, do you want to comment on?
I want to give that to Monty. You want to touch on that a little bit? So this is Monty Bottoms. We had last, he talked about field day the year before for that.
So there's a lot of challenges when it comes to mobile processing systems. The kill is the hardest part. Finding partnering with folks like Jason to do the cut and packaging is even more prevalent in my understanding. We're looking at the mobile units that can be modular, in other words, placed into a place where if it's not ideal, we can move it again with cranes and trucks. But we're also looking at semi-reefer van conversions that we can use. The biggest trouble, and I just actually on the phone on the way out here today, is finding people who can get a USDA inspector approved to come because they have to be there at the time we kill. They want to make sure that it's done correctly and also have to inspect heart, lungs, and some other things on the carcass. So there is a way, and there's an outfit out of Washington that I just became aware of that can help fast track the paperwork process. It'll be about 30 to 45 days. So we're investigating that right now because that for our business is a bottleneck where we could get a reefer van and then be able to work with other farmers to do come on site. Plus for the animal, much better experience versus getting loaded up in the trailer all 2 to 4 hours, stand in the dark room overnight, first time on concrete, what's going on, and then shocked by people and don't know how to handle animals through a facility and ramp them up on adrenaline and put them down. So we want to be taking one great juicy bite of cover crops and then the next second they see their buddy falling down and don't understand why. We feel that'll create the best experience in flavor, texture, and quality. We also think it's what's best for the animal.
Great. What's a system like that?
So the question is, what does a system like that run and potentially for cost? It's too early to know that, but there's tremendous cost in not being able to do the process.
In that system, does the waste stay on the farm, or is the waste going with your mobile reefer?
So there are regulations around that. Is the waste going to stay on the farm or go with the mobile reefer? So one of the suggestions is find a small size feedlot that has gone out of business that would have a runoff containment type of thing. The effluent from the animal can go into that same containment. That's being done currently in Kansas and Colorado. But that does have to be captured if you're going to roll into this farm and then roll out. That has to be captured and properly disposed of. That's another part of the paperwork process. Yep.
Oh, yeah, Jordan wanted me to explain the chickens and the flies. And flies have been a problem. Somebody asked about problems or things we do different. Early on, especially in, I think it was in July, we did have quite a few flies. And we thought that having the chickens 3 days behind, the idea is that the animals lay the manure down, and then the larva is laid, or the eggs are laid, and the larva hatches. And the idea is the chickens scratch through, eat the larva, and then eliminate the flies. That's one thing. I mean, we still had fly issues, and so Jordan Ring put these traps in here that you can see, and that's why they're in there to manage that. It did seem to be, somewhat. I mean, it always spike after rains. Hasn't been as bad the last few weeks, but the fly thing definitely really was an issue. What else for questions?
I got a question. Have you had to give these animals any shots at all besides the one that couldn't get up?
Have we had to give any of the animal shots besides Tiger Pig, who had come put weight on his leg here a week ago? I don't think so.
Just the chicken.
Oh yeah, just our mascot Lazarette, the chicken that I think Jordan caught her in the chicken tractor when we moved her leg. We didn't want her to die, so we gave her some penicillin, and she's still in the cage up by the house. So that's it. I thought about having Jordan bring her down, or maybe we would butcher her for the event or something, but the kids have kind of gotten attached to Lazarette, so she might become a lane head for us. So. What else? A lot of good questions. I appreciate you guys typing up. And the thing is if, if we're getting to that point of the event where things are petering out, or you want to talk amongst yourselves, or you want to just come up and visit with us, feel free. But from as far as what we have left to present, this is pretty much it. You're welcome to stay as long as you want. We've got a question over here.
What are you guys going to be working on this winter?
It's like what I talked about. We're going to be, developing, hopefully manufacturing the barns and getting that figured out. There's some things we've got going behind the scenes right now that we're applying for some USDA grants to help us with hopefully maybe bring some more resources in to speed it up. Right now it's primarily Sheldon and I doing a lot of the development on it, and we've got a lot of other things on our plate other than this. This is pretty much a nighttime or weekend activity for us. So we're hoping those things come through and that'll expedite, speed this thing up, building the story, doing more speaking, things of that nature. So,
What do you foresee the cost of this thing when it gets going? Of the
where's Sheldon? So come here, address that one into the mic.
the cost? Ballpark.
Of this?
Yeah.
You don't want to answer?
You go. You said you want to.
Well, there's obviously a lot of features that can drive the cost up. It's gonna be like the mini, my gut says $10 maybe. This one comes with my surprisingly, because we have 30.
But we don't,
I mean, we have, especially with all the costs on the right now, steel and everything's so fluid, it's pretty crazy.
So tell people what we have into it now, approximately.
Right now it sits right around $14, $15. And that's bought everything at wholesale or
That's nothing for your
at
labor.
retail. I mean, that's no special deal.
And nothing for your labor in that?
Oh, no, that includes labor. But obviously, you can keep it up a little bit, but you gotta be careful too.
I think when people saw it the first time, it looked like that's really, really heavy. How is that going to move? You just saw what it did. I think there's some ways we can lighten it up, but we don't want it falling apart. You don't want to have 30 of these things out there and have animals get out and have problems. That's a really bad day when they get into your neighbor's field. So that is one thing I do envision. Like if we had this system out, I would want to have some sort of secondary fence that would hold things in if they were to get out. Just to have that containment, also keep predators out as well. That would be another idea that we would probably add. We didn't really have any of those issues. We didn't have any predators really bug us, other than we saw a badger about 2 weeks ago run between one of the runs, but he wasn't interested. Anything else for questions? So if not, I think I'm just going to wrap up by saying thank you. This was great. This is what I wanted. I like seeing all the side conversations and people looking and pointing at what we got. I wanted to have folks come together to see it in person and get their minds thinking. And I want to thank Jason Mock for driving out here and agreeing to speak and bringing his message. Rick Bieber from South Dakota. That was kind of an impromptu thing we had at the last minute. But like Jason said, if you've got, I almost didn't put this out in the world because I was worried about what people were going to think. And I think we do that way too much in this business. There's lots of people that have good ideas. They're worried about getting beat up by other folks. And it would really be kicking myself because I've gotten so much Sheldon, Juice, Lance. I mean, it's really been a cool thing. So don't be afraid to go after these things and chase the dragon every once in a while, and some good things might happen. So with that, thank you everybody for coming. You're welcome to stay as long as you want, get your questions asked. If you want to come up and ask things, if you want to come up closer, I'll mask up if you feel more comfortable with that. But it's been a great afternoon. Thank you once again.
So thanks for watching our 2020 Stock Cropper Field Day video here. Hopefully the the contents stirred your minds and your hearts a little bit about some of the fun possibilities for the future of agriculture that this system could provide. So I'd encourage folks to like our YouTube channel here and give us follows on Twitter at Zebulus Prime. That's my Twitter handle. Or on Instagram, _stock_cropper, or on Facebook, The Stock Cropper. We're on all those platforms, and we just launched our new website, thestockcropper.com. So check us out if you're interested in more information, would like to get in contact with us. It'd be great to connect with you. Thanks again for watching.